Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick Valentine. I welcome you to this very special afternoon on 9/11 at Mount St. Mary's. This is a really special day for the people of Newburgh because we have truly one of our own here today. But I would like to thank all of you for coming today, and I also would like to do a special thank you to all the veterans that are in attendance today. So if you could either stand or raise your hand, I would appreciate that. We'd like to give you a hand. As you were coming in, you saw some volunteers that are raising some funds for the Hudson Valley organization, the Committee for the Families of War Veterans. If you didn't get a chance to donate on your way out, if you could, this event was free of charge, but we wanted to have money raised to go to families of veterans within the Hudson Valley. So every dollar you give to them stays here. It is an organization that is not top-heavy, does not have a big staff, so the money that you give will go to the benefit of the veterans of the Hudson Valley. So we appreciate your donations. I would now ask that we do the presentation of the colors. This is from the 105th Airlift Wing Honor Guard at Stewart. So I'd ask you to all to stand. And then if you could remain standing for our national anthem, invocation, and moment of silence. The Star-Spangled Banner will be sung by Master Sergeant Mary K. Messenger, U.S. Military Academy band vocalist.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Mary Kay. We will now have the invocation, 105th Airlift Wing Chaplain, Major Lawrence Friedman.
It is my honor to have been asked to deliver the invocation for this commemoration, in particular because when not in uniform, I serve as the rabbi at Temple Beth Jacob just a few blocks away, and it is always a pleasure to come over to the campus of Mount St. Mary College. This day is a day of sadness and a day of resolve. It is a day to remember what our enemies did to us, but more importantly, it is a day to consider how we choose to react. What kind of people are these? What kind of people are we? These are just some of the questions that arise on this day of commemoration. For the last few weeks, the Jewish people have been finishing our reading of the Torah, our lectionary cycle, if you will. I have to translate it into Catholic. It includes great moral urging, and if we are honest, great violence against others. The rabbis long ago worked hard to diminish those words, to interpret those words away, to make them one time only, to say, that was then, but the Jewish people no longer behaves in such a way. We focus on the moral and ethical teachings. Those are eternal. Let us work to put moments of violence long behind us. Yet today we see some religious groups still inflicting horrifying violence against others in the name of religion. We can hardly believe that such a thing is back. We thought it was confined to history centuries, millennia ago. And so we pray, Avinu Shebashamayim, our God in heaven, teach us to focus on the best of your word, the moral, the ethical, the teachings that uplift our faith and our people and all people throughout the world, and help us understand our history as we place some of our texts in a museum of concluded teachings. We come before you knowing that the history of our faith has things to answer for, and we come before you proclaiming that we have indeed evolved, progressed, and gained new insights and teachings that allow us to find more paths for love and fewer paths for hatred. Guide us with your love as you lead us to live our lives that make our expression of your will one that serves only to uplift, to heal, and to make the world a better place. And we say, Amen.
And I would just ask for a moment of silence for all the victims of 9/11 and for all the military who sacrificed so much following the 9/11 attacks. Thank you very much, and you may be seated. It is now my honor to introduce Dr. Ann Carson Daly. Dr. Daly is the 6th president of Mount St. Mary College and has careers in academia, government, and business. After graduating from Mount Holyoke College with a BA in English and History, she earned her MA and her PhD in English Literature from Johns Hopkins. She taught there, as well as at the University of Notre Dame and at Georgetown University, before serving as the second-in-command at the National Advisory Council on Educational Research and Improvement, which advised the President, the Congress, and the Secretary of Education on educational matters nationwide. In the business world, Dr. Daly served at Pfizer Incorporated, the world's largest pharmaceutical company, where she supervised policy communications on 5 continents. Before coming to the Mount, Dr. Daly was Vice President for Academic Affairs and Dean of the Faculty at Belmont Abbey College in North Carolina. A member of Phi Beta Kappa, she co-translated a major work on the foundings of the Jesuits from French to English and has penned more than 80 articles and reviews on a wide array of topics, including literature, religion, architecture, education, and business. She has given more than 100 lectures throughout the United States and Europe. Please welcome Dr. Daly.
Thank you, Nick, for that kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the entire Mount St. Mary College community, I want to welcome you to our campus. As has been well said today, it's a somber day, but also a day of great hope. We are so grateful to everyone who has made today possible and who has put this event together. We want to thank Nick Predis for giving us the opportunity to host Colonel Darling, and to thank Nick Valentine for emceeing, and to express our great appreciation to Sue Valentine and to Mount St. Mary College's Advancement Office for all of the work that they have done today to put together this important event. We are especially pleased to welcome this afternoon Colonel Darling's wife, Angela, and Dr. Albert Gruner, the chair of the Mount St. Mary College Board of Trustees, and Sister Ann Sakak and Sister Ann Stankiewicz. Sister Ann Sakak is our very well-beloved President Emerita, so we're especially pleased to have her with us today. And we are also honored to have with us this afternoon two of the Mount's great friends, Bill Kaplan and Jonathan Gatzik, who also is a member of our board. In addition, we are delighted to see Senator Larkin and Mrs. Larkin, and Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney, and County Legislator James Kulisek. So I'm sure I've probably left out somebody, but we're so glad to have all of you with us. It means so much that you've come here to celebrate with us this solemn event. All of us, I think, remember with great emotion and great clarity the horrible events of 9/11. But it is a tremendous privilege for us today to have with us someone who not only has served his country with distinction abroad and at home, but who also was on the front lines on that horrible day as both a participant and an eyewitness to historic events of truly global significance. We were especially pleased that Colonel Darling, who comes from Newburgh, has done us the great honor of coming here today to share with us, as a hometown boy, his experiences on that day that, if you've read his book, you know are absolutely riveting. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today.
I carry the book with me all the time. It's a great read. I would now like to introduce Nick Predis, CEO of MassMutual Albany Hudson Valley. This is the one person responsible for bringing Lieutenant Colonel Darling to this event. He read the book in one night. He was having a conversation with my wife, Susan, about motivational speakers, and she gave him the book. He read it. The next morning, he called Susan and he said, "What will it take to get him here?" And she answered, "I can get that done." Nick's answer was, "Let's do it." Ladies and gentlemen, Nick Predis.
Thanks, Nick. On behalf of MassMutual and all of my colleagues, I'd like to thank everyone for coming and welcome you to this very special event. I'd like to echo Nick's comments. Any active duty personnel, retired military personnel, firefighters, police officers, first responders, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for the harm you're willing to put yourself in to keep us safe and keep us free. Thank you. So Nick already told the essence of the story. Susan and I have the privilege of working together, and I had asked her about somebody who'd be truly motivational, somebody we could bring to the community, somebody that would really be impactful, and she handed me, I believe it's the same copy of the book Nick has. So I'm sorry, Bob, I haven't bought one yet. I will. And it's true, I did read it in one night, and I did call her the next day and say, how do we get him here? And she did say, I'll take care of it, and in fact, she has. So I'd like to thank Susan. She's put in hundreds of hours in promoting this and pulling the event together. Dr. Daly, Joe Valente, and Michelle, and their staff from the college have been just incredible partners in this. So thank you so much for all of your efforts. And I'm going to get off the stage now and let the person you came here to see take the stage. So thank you.
So how do I introduce Bobby? And I can say Bobby because Lieutenant Colonel Robert Darling and I go back a long time. He actually worked for me in my tailor shop in Newburgh when he was 16 years old. There are some stories of those times that we're not going to get into today because I want you to leave respecting Robert Darling and his achievements, but they're for another time. He's a product of Newburgh schools, graduated from NFA. He went on to Iona College, and while there, saw what was going on in people that were enlisting in the Marines, and it caught his interest. He says, I think I can do this. I think this is where my future is. The rest of it is read the book. Truly read the book. It's a great, real story of leadership and patriotism. One of our own back here to relive the events of one of the most horrific days in U.S. history. I am very, very proud to introduce and have come up Lieutenant Colonel Robert Darling.
Thank you, my friend. Well, hello. Thank you all for being here. There are just so many people, not only to say hello to, but to thank. I first want to thank Dr. Daly and Joe Valenti and Nick Predis and Nick Valentine and Sue Valentine, of course. But Senator Larkin, thank you, sir, and Mrs. Larkin for being here as well. 14 years ago, we were attacked by 19 Islamic, radical, fundamental terrorists. They hijacked 4 airplanes. They drove them into 3 buildings, World Trade Center Towers, the Pentagon, and we believe the 4th one was heading for the U.S. Capitol had it not been taken down by the heroes on board United Flight 93. I'm going to take you back to that day. I'm going to take you into the White House President's Emergency Operations Center. We're going to go call by call, event by event. I always have to warn everybody, it gets a little heavy at times. I'll do my best to inject a little levity where I think it's appropriate, but 9/11, there's not a lot that's funny about 9/11, but we're going to do our best to share a story with you without making it too much of a distraction for all of us. But let me first set the stage. What a lot of people don't know is that when our president, the leader of the free world, when he travels on Air Force One, there's already 700 to 1,000 people that went in advance of him. We've already moved in his limousines, his helicopters, his secure phones, his doctors, his snipers, his Marines, his security, his cooks. Everything he needs goes in advance of Air Force One. We're fully rehearsed. We know where all the hospitals are, all the helicopter landing zones, everything we need. So the moment he steps off Air Force One, he's prepared to execute his political agenda because everybody behind the scenes is there to support him. And when he goes to Japan and then Korea and then China, we can't outrun Air Force One. So I got to put 700 people in Alaska that's there just for him to refuel. I got another 700 people in Japan. I'll take Alaska, move it to Korea. I'll take Japan, move it to China. I'll take Korea, move it to Hawaii. It is so big a logistics trail and so expensive, we won't put it in one pot of money because Senator Larkin and all his buddies will take it from us. There's just no way. It really would. It would fix some deficits. And that's what it takes to keep the leader of the free world, our president, alive. No other world leader gets that. When President Putin comes from Russia to visit the United States, he flies in our helicopter, rides in our cars, and talks on our phones. He can bring his inner circle security with him, but that's just about it. But not our president. And if he ever goes to Africa, we'll fly a Trauma One Center into Africa with all the state-of-the-art equipment and the best doctors in the world to keep our president alive should a calamity come to him, should he be shot, have a heart attack, or some other disaster occur. That's the extent of the logistics package. All right, September 11th, 2001, President Bush is in Sarasota, Florida. I described his logistics package to you. I'm going to set the stage here. We're going to go into the Eisenhower Executive Office building. Let's kick this off. Let's go back there. Okay, I put up here my first slide. There's only 2 members in the U.S. government who can give offensive, lethal orders out to the United States military. Anybody can defend themselves. But if we're going to go topple a government or we're going to go shoot somebody down and it's going to be an offensive operation, it's got to come from the National Command Authority. The National Command Authority is made up of the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense. Their orders go down to the 4-star, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and then out to the 4-star combatant commanders around the world. That's how it works. That's how we train. That's how we're rehearsed. And we're looking for orders all the time coming from these 2 individuals. The President was at Emma E. Booker Elementary School in Sarasota, Florida, and Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld was in the Pentagon that day, in the National Military Command Center, basically the Operations Center of the Pentagon. Everybody else is in support of the president, to include the vice president. He's a member of the National Security Council or National Security Staff. His only job is to be a tiebreaker in the Senate or fill in for the president should the 25th Amendment be enacted if the president becomes killed or incapacitated. The vice president was in the White House. Dr. Rice, who was a national security advisor at the time, was in the White House in her office. I put 2 general officers down because General Shelton, United States Army, was in the process of turning over his post to General Richard Myers, United States Air Force. General Shelton was out of the country. General Myers was at Capitol Hill that day at a congressional breakfast. I arrived in the Eisenhower Executive Office building at 8 o'clock that day. My mission was to clean up Sarasota, Florida when the president got wheels up on Air Force One. I was going to bring all those things home. Normal day, we huddle up around 8:15. Our boss, who was a GS-15, Government Service 15 employee, had us all huddle up saying, hey, what's going on with the president, vice president, first lady, a White House congressional delegation? What do we got on the schedule that day? Very simple day, 78 degrees, not a cloud in the sky. It was supposed to be an easy day. 8:46, somebody ran in the office and said, hey, you need to turn on CNN. Apparently a small aircraft just struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. As you can see in that picture right there wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was just a beautiful day. All the pilots in the office there knew right away, hey, that's a pretty big hole for such a small airplane that apparently hit the building. There's got to be a lot more to this. Pilots don't run into buildings that are 110 stories tall. We can ditch in the water. We look for safe places to land. We don't hit prominent landmarks like the World Trade Center towers. Sure enough, we soon learned that was American Airlines Flight 11. It departed out of Boston Logan Airport on its way out to California. It went as far as Albany, New York, made a hard left-hand turn, was lost communications, complete blackout, and ended up into the North Tower at 8:46. 9:03. I really say 9:03, the world was watching at 9:03, to include us in the Eisenhower building, when we saw United Airlines Flight 175 come into view. I was in the office with those other pilots I described from the Airlift Operations Office. I said, hey, what is this moron doing? Trying to get a look at the hole in the building in the North Tower before he circles around to land at LaGuardia Airport, when all of a sudden we watched United Airlines Flight 175 careen into the South Tower at what looked like full power. My boss, who was an Air Force colonel, came running into the room and said, hey, eyeballs on me. Everybody pay attention. We got a full-blown terrorist attack unfolding right before our eyes up there in the city of New York. Stand by for a lot of White House designated missions. And what does that mean? It means if anybody wants to call the Department of Defense and say, I want to get doctors, relief supplies, heavy equipment, if you want to get stuff up to New York and you're the Department of Interior or Commerce or Energy or Agriculture, you're no more important than anybody else, and you get put into a queue. And the Department of Defense will move you as soon as they can. But if you call the White House and say, hey, boss, this is FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, I got 100 doctors on standby ready to go. I got medicines and everything you need to go up there and help with what's going on in New York. And he says, great, do it. You become a 1 Alpha 1. That's how we categorize you. You're a 1 Alpha 1 priority. We will push baby food out of the next available Air Force jet to get you loaded up and to get you and your people and your supplies up in New York. So we were in the process of dealing with all the government agencies now, calling the White House, saying, I need to be there, I need a 1 Alpha 1, and they're all requesting us to go and try to process them through. Sure enough, we soon learned that United Airlines Flight 175 also departed out of Boston Logan Airport, and our first responders that day, the heroes that we're going to talk about, were already doing what they're trained to do. We had shut down all bridges and tunnels going to and from Manhattan. There's like 14 or 15 different entry-exit points. They were already doing that. There was a ground stop at LaGuardia, a ground stop at Boston. Even without the U.S. government interceding right now, heroes of the day were doing what they were trained to do to get this catastrophic event isolated, mitigated, and hopefully get us back to normal as soon as we can. Here it is, it's a file photo of Andy Card, White House Chief of Staff, walking to the Emmett E. Booker Elementary School, and he whispered in President Bush's ear, Mr. President, a second airliner has just struck the South Tower. America is under attack. And we all remember President Bush's face when he heard that news. Now try to imagine what that's like. You've been president for 8 months. You're from Texas. You didn't grow up in this environment. You got a room full of kids, and in the back wall is the press corps. Behind this wall right here is your mobile situation room, where all this information is coming in, it's being processed. And you're watching all this unfold, and you're saying to yourself, do I get up and leave? Secret Service always wants them to leave, but sometimes these political leaders want to stay right where they're at. They want to do the right thing. They don't want to panic, because they know their job is to be the face of the nation, and our job is to develop options for the president. Develop options for the president so he can make an executive decision to get America back on its feet. He decided to stay in that classroom. At 9:30, he made his remarks. The Secret Service got him back in the motorcade, and they whisked him back to Sarasota, Florida airport as fast as they could go. I will tell you, in times of national calamity, we want to get our president airborne. We call it the big sky, little bullet theory. No matter what's going on in the world or on the ground, if we get him up in the air, he's got Air Force One, which is a fully capable 747. He can have any conversation with any world leader, and we can put him high and away from any danger that's occurring outside. And if it's an air threat, we can protect him with fighter aircraft and put a huge bubble of defenses around that platform so the president can execute his daily duties. Okay, we're doing the 1 Alpha 1s. We're working the phones. Everybody's prioritizing what's happening. It's going well, and all of a sudden, an airliner overflew the White House. And I will tell you, this airliner was so low and so loud that everybody just froze right there on the 4th floor of the Eisenhower building when someone finally ran to the window and said, I just saw a big white jet in the hard left-hand turn heading west. Next thing you know, 9:37, breaking news, fire and explosion over at the Pentagon. We don't just have an air attack on New York City. It looks like we have a coordinated multi-city air attack on America. Just then, my boss runs in and says, hey, that's it. Everybody shut it down. We can't stay here. Something just broke P-56. And P-56 is the acronym, if you will, for the prohibited airspace over the top of the White House. If anybody who's an aviator knows, it's prohibited airspace. It's on every aviation chart there is that says, don't overfly this. It's prohibited. Well, P-56 was just violated. Pentagon's on fire. Everybody's getting ready to move to the alternate site when all of a sudden at 9:45 that day, all these loudspeakers I didn't even know existed came on and said, evacuate the White House, evacuate the Eisenhower Executive Office building, everybody lock your desks, secure your gear, and go to their alternate sites. I didn't even know those speakers existed. The last time the White House was evacuated was 1814 when the British were burning down Washington, D.C., and Dolly Madison got up from dinner and was carrying George Washington's print out the back door. Here it is 187 years later, and we're evacuating the White House for the second time. So sure enough, that's it. My boss said, shut it down. I don't care what you're worried about. We're out of here. Everybody go. And I grabbed him. His name is Colonel Mark Irwin. I said, Colonel, I can't leave. President Bush is not coming back from Sarasota, Florida. Wherever he goes, he needs limousines, helicopters, Secret Service, security. He needs phone. He needs the presidential package I described to you earlier. He said, well, you can't stay here. Take the planning kit, go across the street, go under the White House, and go in the President's Emergency Operations Center, the bunker complex, and you do logistics. The rest of us will catch up with you later. Go. As I got to the top of the stairs, I left the Eisenhower building. I'm looking over at the West Wing, the white awning on West Executive Drive. I had to stop for a minute. The White House is literally a fortress. There is security on top of security as far out and left and right, north and south, as you can imagine. The Secret Service had the gates to the south wide open, the gates to the north wide open. Everybody seemed to have an automatic weapon, and they're yelling to the professional young staffers that work there, ladies, take off your heels and run. There's another plane inbound. Seeing these young, professional, 20-something-year-olds kicking off shoes and dropping briefcases and purses and sprinting off the White House complex was really just a surreal sight. And apparently there was another plane inbound. So I didn't hesitate too long to get myself out of harm's way as well. I got across the street. I showed Secret Service my credentials. He let me in. Before long, I'm underground. As you can imagine, a big door opens, a big door closes. I'm inside the President's Emergency Operations Center. Okay, so we're not going to tell you how thick the walls are or how deep the bunker complex it is. But we know it exists, and it's run by the White House Military Office, and it's put there for days just like today. So the first person I see when I walk into the White House bunker complex is a friend of mine, and he was the Vice President Cheney's, it was his military aide. He was an Air Force major. I said, hey, Tom, I'm here to do logistics. I'll stay out of your way. He said, Bob, forget logistics. Answer the phones. They're ringing off the hook. So you can imagine this operation center. It's got a bunch of consoles against the wall. It's got phones, and they're all ringing. There's people at each one of these consoles taking notes, answering calls. I look down this long line, and I see an empty desk at the far end. Sure enough, as I get closer, I can hear the phone ringing. So I run down there. I drop the briefcase. I pick up the phone. It's about 9:52 that morning. Here was my first phone call that day. Major Darling. The gentleman on the other end was a officer in the Situation Room up in the West Wing. Right away, he said, Major, we have another hijacked plane 16 miles south of Pittsburgh, inbound, Washington, D.C. My first reaction was, whoa, you're going to have to hold on just a second. As I turned to my right to pass this information to Tom Sharpey, the military aide, who's standing beside me now this far away was Vice President Cheney. And right behind him was his wife, Lynn. And then there was Dr. Rice and her deputy, Stephen Hadley, and then Norman Mineta, who was the Secretary of Transportation, and his deputy, because everybody who was upstairs in the West Wing was now forced underground by the violation of P-56, by that Phantom jet that just went by heading west. And now they were in the bunker complex coming over to me to hear about the first phone call regarding the hijacked plane 16 miles south of Pittsburgh. The minute I told the Vice President, he immediately turned to his left. He looked up at the wall, and there's these 3 speaker boxes, and they're direct lines to different agencies around the government. The first one was a direct patch to the FAA. And he said, hey, Rick, this is the Vice President. I understand we have another hijacked plane somewhere south of Pittsburgh, inbound Washington, D.C. Can you confirm that for me? Mr. Vice President, stand by. We're checking. Sir, that aircraft is not talking. It's not squawking a transponder code, which gives the FAA direction, altitude, and airspeed information. That black box was off. It's way off course. Mr. Vice President, that's a hijacked aircraft. Second speaker box chirps to life. Hey, Don, are you up? He's looking for that other member of the National Command Authority, that other member who can give offensive lethal orders out to our fighters. Secretary Rumsfeld was not in the building. For whatever reason, at 9:37, when American Airlines Flight 77 careened into the west side of the Pentagon, he ran outside to assist with the wounded. Very admirable thing to do. But now we have nobody at the helm. The President is in motion in Florida. The Secretary of Defense is in the parking lot at the Pentagon. There's nobody at the helm to give offensive lethal instructions to the U.S. military. So we're scrambling jets and moving equipment around, and there's no orders from the top. Finally, the Vice President, after being frustrated at the absence of Donald Rumsfeld, inserted himself back into the chain of command and said, this is the Vice President. I want 2 F-15s out of Otis Air National Guard Base. Let me know when they're airborne. Stand by to shoot this aircraft down. And I got to tell you, folks, I made sure that receiver was covered. I turned a little to my right, and I didn't see him as a politician any longer. I was shocked by that order. I was trained, mentally trained, that we're going to develop options for the President. Instead, we just unleashed the U.S. Air Force 2 F-15s to run Flight 93 down. Then I realized quickly that this is not just an ordinary politician. He's a congressman from Wyoming. He was Chief of Staff for President Ford. He was Secretary of Defense for H.W. Bush. And now he's Vice President of the United States for George Bush. He didn't just say, get me fighters. He knew which fighters were on alert, at what air bases, and who would be the closest one to respond to United Flight 93. Within seconds, we heard F-15s are airborne. They are supersonic over Long Island, New York. That is 1,200 miles an hour, heading for United Flight 93. They want to be confirmed weapons free to engage. Without any hesitation, Vice President said, they are cleared hot. Shoot it down. 10:05. Minutes later, everybody stood on pins and needles. All the SATCOM radios or satellite radios in the bunker complex blared to life. Aircraft down, 68 miles south of Pittsburgh, no survivors. On orders from the Vice President to the F-15s, we thought we had just shot United Flight 93 out of the sky. All eyes were on the Vice President. His back is to us. He's staring up at those 3 speaker boxes. He spun around. He walked right over to me, and said, "Major, for the congressional investigation, state your full name." And I'm thinking, no. No. You didn't get the word. I'm here to do logistics. And sure enough, I said, "Major Bob Darling." He goes, "From Major Darling to the Vice President to the National Military Command Center, we just shot that plane down. I really need to talk to the President." And all those other consoles were turned to, and they're going, "Air Force One, Air Force One." This is the White House. They're trying to reach President Bush on Air Force One to get a clean patch through. Within seconds, those same satellite radios blared back to life. The F-15s never fired. The F-15s never fired. United Flight 93 was on the ground when they got there. It was taken out by the 40 brave passengers and crew who decided to fight back against the 4 terrorists that hijacked that aircraft. And I always tell everybody, try to imagine what it was like in that cockpit or in that cabin when you got some people say, "Let's not do anything and agitate them." Other people say, we got to go fight for ourselves. 3 planes, 3 targets. This is not a ransom mission. This is a suicide mission. This is now a 150-ton Tomahawk cruise missile heading for a target in Washington, D.C., and they did it. They came to a consensus. They stormed the cockpit. They fought back with the terrorists, and ultimately they defeated them by preventing them from reaching what we believe would have been the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. True heroes of the day. Here it is. President now is on the phone. They got through to him. They talked about Flight 93, and he instituted 2 classified programs. Details aren't important. But continuity of presidency and continuity of government are now in effect. Essentially, the president, the vice president, and the Speaker of the House can no longer be in the same geographical location. Vice President was already in Washington, D.C. President Bush can't come back to Washington, D.C. now. Vice President's here. Continuity of government. The principals of the 3 branches, the judges go to their secure complex, legislators go to their secure complex, and then ultimately the executive branch has to go to their secure complex. Because no matter what happens in the world, the presidency must survive, and our great democracy must continue to function. It's not just about us. We're the worldwide leader of all of our allies out there, and they need to be rest assured and assured that our government is safe, our president is safe, and our government is going to continue to function no matter what's happening in America, and that's why he did that. Now you see up here, White House sealed, and then I got that photo on the bottom. That's the executive side of the bunker complex. That's the one that you're going to see all Cheney photos from side. We're on the other side of that wall, which was the operations center. But on the far left here is Karen Hughes. She was an aide to President Bush, came with him from Texas. There's a White House communicator next to Dr. Rice. Behind Dr. Rice is David Addington. He was an attorney for Vice President Cheney. There's Mary Madeline. She was an aide to the Vice President, married to James Carville. And there's the Vice President himself. And he was working the phones right there because we're trying to keep track of all the airliners that were still missing that morning. Then it gets really busy. We just survived Flight 93. We didn't shoot it down. All of a sudden at 10:08, everybody stopped what they're doing, turned their focus over to CNN, and they were reporting that, in fact, the South Tower of the World Trade Center had collapsed. In the bunker complex, there was a lot of agitated people, a lot of swear words. People were upset. People were in disbelief. I was in disbelief. I kept saying to the guys closest to me, "That's impossible. Maybe we lost the first 10 floors. Maybe they melted. Maybe they pancaked. But there's no way a 110-story building in a city of 8 million, in an area with 750,000 people, we got a tower like that on the ground." And they were like, "No kidding. The South Tower's on the ground." Cheney, looking up at the TV set, all of a sudden yells out to everybody in the room, "Does anyone know how many people work there?" Someone yelled back, "There's 7 buildings in the World Trade Center complex, 50,000 people on any given day work in those 2 buildings. He literally flipped over a sheet of paper. He's doing some rough order of math, gets the president on the phone right here, and he goes, "Mr. President, we just got word that we lost the South Tower, sir. It's on the ground. It's my best guess we have 20,000 dead Americans in New York City." Mr. President, while I got you on the phone, sir, they're telling me now that a portion of the Pentagon has just collapsed. Again, I don't have exact figures, but it's my best guess we have 800 to 1,000 dead over at the Pentagon. Sure enough, They ended up hanging up, and sure enough, the Secret Service calls me up from wherever they were in the building, and they're tracking what they call a bogey aircraft, an unidentified aircraft. They have sensors. I will just tell you, do not parachute onto the White House. The Secret Service will see you coming. And the Secret Service is now tracking this bogey aircraft, and they're calling down to the bunker complex 8 miles out. We got a bogey, an unidentified aircraft. If we identify him as hostile, we'll call him a bandit. If we identify him as friendly, we'll call him such. Right now, we don't know, so he's a bogey. 8 miles out, coming at us down the Potomac. Mr. Vice President, we got a bogey 8 miles out, coming to the White House, down the Potomac River, down low. He turns to that speaker box. Donald Rumsfeld is now in the Pentagon. Don, I got a bogey 8 miles out, coming at us. Do we have an asset to take a shot at this guy? In the meantime, I'm going, Mr. Vice President, 7, 6, 5. He goes, Don, I'll authorize an over-the-horizon. No visual confirmation required. If you got an AMRAAM missile on an F-16 over Baltimore, shoot this guy, shoot this guy, shoot this guy. And they came back, and there was no fighters over Washington, D.C. Finally, I got down to Mr. Vice President, 2 miles. And he said, that's it, stop counting. If the Secret Service can't deal with it on the roof, everybody in here stand by for impact. And I remember turning to the console in front of me, putting my hands right down there and going, the world's greatest superpower just said checkmate. We don't have a fighter over Washington, and we have hundreds of people outside, Secret Service on the roof, all those uniformed and plainclothes Secret Service who are manning the perimeters, and we just said, we're checkmate. I remember it was an unbelievably sad moment for me when just then they all came up on the satellite radio. That's not a bogey. That, in fact, was a medevac helicopter heading for the Pentagon to save lives, not talking on the right frequency. Because Reagan Tower evacuated. So this helicopter that came out of Fort Belvoir with doctors and EMS on there to go get burn victims from the Pentagon decided to keep pressing. And when they kept pressing, when they didn't have clearance to come into Washington, D.C. airspace, if we would have had an asset over Baltimore, a fighter, we would have shot a plane full of heroes and doctors and air crew out of the sky. They call it fog of war. It was just the one time I know where the fog of war worked out in our behalf because we didn't have an asset to take a shot at them. Here it is, 10:14. I got Secretary Norman Mineta in the bunker complex talking to the Vice President, and they said, clear the skies. We started that morning with 4,500 aircraft. We're down to 2,000 aircraft, and there's still a lot of work to be done. And that's it. The Vice President said, I don't care where they are. Clear the skies, coast to coast, north to south. First time in American history, we're clearing the skies over North America. And the FAA came back and said, that order is a little bit too, that's beyond our capabilities. So immediately, we transferred airspace control to the U.S. Air Force. NORAD, the 4-star Cheyenne Mountain, said, we have airspace control over the United States. If you are not a military aircraft, you are no longer authorized to be in the air. Everybody land at the next suitable airfield and come up on the net. I tell you, that was, and I put up here, NAOC was airborne because it turned out NAOC is a National Airborne Operations Center, an E-4B, an Air Force 747. It's a doomsday plane. It's used to launch nuclear weapons. Well, that morning, the Air Force was doing a nuclear command and control exercise. The plane was over at Andrews, and when the second tower was hit, they scrambled that plane to get down by Air Force One. For whatever reason, that plane made a left-hand turn out of Andrews. That's what broke P-56. That's the airplane we saw out of our window. It was not the airplane that careened into the west side of the Pentagon. Those two planes literally must have been seconds from each other. But this plane was NAOC, an Air Force plane. NAOC was reporting in position down there near Air Force One. If the president wants to get off that plane and get on this plane, they're prepared to make the switch. I'll tell you something else here. When you do that, when you clear the skies, you think it's easy to take 2,000 aircraft and tell everybody to land in the next suitable airfield. Well, guess what? There's a lot happening out there. We got little kids who have cancer that need to get to a hospital. You ground them, they die. You have snake bite victims that are getting to a hospital. You ground them, they die. There's a lot of things happening over the airspace of the United States where you just start ordering people to clear the skies, and there's going to be a lot of casualties. I tell you what, the FAA did a great job, though. They turned over airspace control, and they sequenced all those special missions in through the Air Force over to the White House, and we were able to give them special mission codes to treat them as if they were military. So no EMS helicopter or no organ donor aircraft or anybody else had to land in the next little airfield. They made it to their destination. It was pretty impressive. 1017, as if it wasn't already busy enough, we got a report that we have 2 explosions, one on Capitol Hill, and we have an explosion at the U.S. Department of State down the road. So we don't just have a multi-city air attack, it looks like it's a coordinated air-ground attack. Vice President Cheney turns and goes, Condoleezza Rice, figure out what's going on. She immediately runs over to my phone, she calls over to the people at the U.S. Capitol, and they said, ma'am, that's an erroneous report. We're doing an orderly evacuation. There has been no explosion here. Thank you very much. Boom, hangs up. Calls the U.S. Department of State, and they said, ma'am, we had an explosion. We're investigating it right now. She's like, I need an answer. Tell me about it. What's going on? What's happening? And finally, they came back on the net and said, it wasn't a terrorist event. It wasn't a car bomb. It was a backup generator system that when we powered it up, it exploded. Added to more confusion in an already very, very busy day. All right, 10:20. Sitting at my desk, just got done with Dr. Rice talking to the State Department, phone rings. I pick it up, and it's the Secret Service going, we got a credible threat. And a credible source in the Sarasota, Florida area, that Angel is the next target. Angel happened to be the code word for President Bush when he's on Air Force One. So immediately I turned to my right and I said, ma'am, credible threat, Sarasota, Florida area, Angel's the next target. Dr. Rice looks at me and she goes, hey, who the hell is Angel? So again, you would think that the National Security Advisor knew the code word for the president. So I explained that to her, and then off she goes running. By the way, all the presidents have code words. I think President Reagan was Rawhide, President Bush was Angel, I think President Clinton was Player. They all had their own. They all had their own code words. All right, I slipped that in just to break it up a little bit. If he's here, I didn't mean it. I don't know. I think President Clinton was Eagle, but they all had their own code words that day. So sure enough, Dr. Rice goes running off. We call Colonel Mark Tillman, the Air Force One pilot. Said, Colonel, we got an internal threat. Well, we have a threat. We don't know if it's an internal or external threat. He immediately puts the president back into the nose of the aircraft. All the press corps on board the aircraft goes back to their seats. They do a complete communications blackout, meaning that no one is allowed to transmit, no one's allowed to receive, and air traffic control is no longer allowed to track Air Force One. We don't want to tell anybody external to the airplane where he's at, and we don't want anybody inside the airplane, trying to attack the president or transmit and receive any information. And they pulled Air Force One, which is a 747 with enhanced big engines. A normal 747 will carry 300 people. This one carries 70 people, very high, very fast. Colonel Mark Tillman pulled the nose back, pushed the throttles up. They went to 55,000 feet heading west at over 700 miles an hour. If you think you're going to ram Air Force One, you better bring your A game, because that thing right there is motoring. They ended up scrambling 2 F-16s at a Ellington Air National Guard base. It happened to be the same National Guard base that President Bush served with when he was in the Guard force down there in Texas. They didn't even tell him what their mission was. They said, get to 55,000 feet heading west, stand by for vectors, you'll figure it out when you get up there. So you remember seeing Air Force One with fighter escort heading west. 14 minutes after the vice president said, I want the skies over America clear, he now turned, contacted the Pentagon, and said the U.S. military is authorized to shoot down any aircraft still pointing at Washington, D.C. If Johnny is flying his daddy's Cessna on the wrong side of the Potomac River and he hadn't figured out what's going on out there, you can shoot him down. If there was an aircraft still trying to make it into the Washington, D.C. area, that must be a hostile aircraft, you can shoot it down. Sure enough, the Pentagon came back to us and said, just so you know, we have a guided missile destroyer off the coast of New York tracking 60 targets. 60 airliners sequenced to land for the very last time at either LaGuardia, Newark, or JFK, all trying to get down on the ground safely. And the vice president said, I want a firing solution for every one of them. If somebody's not complying with their landing instructions, I want them shot down sooner, not later. We were taking the skies back from the terrorists. in the bunker. Here it is, 1027. They have what they call an air threat conference. If you have something to say to the President of the United States, you can come up on the net and tell him. So the President comes on the net, the PIOC is on the net, the bunker complex is there, there's a few other CIAs on the net, FBI, and they're giving the President a situational awareness brief. And he's going around the horn and they're telling him what they know. Finally, it was Secretary Rumsfeld who said, Mr. President, I recommend that we move our strategic nuclear forces from DEFCON 4 down to DEFCON 3. It'll be the quickest way to get our forces worldwide back to work and everybody moving. Because when a DEFCON condition changes, 5 is peace, one of them, DEFCON 1 is imminent nuclear war. When a DEFCON condition changes, no radio communications are required, bombers get loaded, submarines dive, ships out of port, Marines mount out, bases get hardened, recall rosters go out. So it doesn't matter if you're in the Philippines or you're in Europe. Everything happens at DEFCON changes. Everybody goes back to work, U.S. military. It was a pivotal moment when the U.S. military went from taking body blows to being an offensive lethal force. We're going to war. We just haven't figured out who we're going to war with. Sure enough, President Bush goes, you know, that's a great idea. Have them stand by for DEFCON 2. Dr. Rice, always the provost, the academic, grabs my arm and she goes, Major, we haven't been to DEFCON 2 since the Cuban Missile Crisis back in 1962. I looked at her. I didn't want her to think I was an idiot, so I said, I know. I really didn't know, but I wanted her to think I knew. And sure enough, we haven't been to DEFCON 3 since 1973. During the Yom Kippur War, we moved our strategic nuclear forces to DEFCON 3. So here we are, 2001, and we're doing it again. And I will tell you then, Cheney interrupted Dr. Rice, who was talking to me, and said, hey, Condi, make it happen. Aye, aye, sir. She picked up the red phone on my console. She called over to the National Military Command Center, executive order of the President of the United States, move our strategic nuclear forces from DEFCON 4 down to DEFCON 3. Have them stand by for DEFCON 2. When you heard the Pentagon call out to Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado, home of NORAD, over there, the North American Air Defense Command, and you heard NORAD then call our 4-star combatant commanders around the world, it was bone-chilling, to say the least. Next thing we know, we heard, this is European Command. We are DEFCON 3, standing by DEFCON 2. Southern Command, Joint Forces Command, Special, it was European Central Command, NORAD, everybody. We had 8 4-star combatant commanders around the world. America is DEFCON 3, standing by for DEFCON 2. I put up here, notified the Russians. Sure enough, my phone rings again. Major Darling. They go, I have President Putin holding for the President of the United States. Will you take the call? Again, I'm here to do logistics. I don't even know if I could tell a world leader like that to hold on. So I just said, you're going to have to hold on. And I turned to my right and I yelled out in the bunker complex to the Vice President, everybody who will listen, I have President Putin holding for the President of the United States. Sir, will you take the call? Now the bunker complex goes silent. All eyes on me, all eyes on the Vice President, and I will tell you, the Vice President's shoulders slumped way over, and he just said, hey, Condi, you take the call. I learned so much about leadership that day. If you're top dog and you don't want to do it, delegate it. Give it away. And sure enough, he gave it to Dr. Rice, and she came running over, picks up my phone, talking to President Putin right in front of me, and she's going, Mr. President, thank you for the phone call. Our president is in motion. We don't know the size and the scope of the attack. We don't even know if it's over. But thank you, sir, for standing down your nuclear forces. And she hung up. And as she walked away, the rest of us are going, what was that about? And we're trying to deduct what she meant by that. And I soon learned that whenever we go DEFCON anything, both State Department and the Department of Defense call their counterparts in Russia and say the United States is now DEFCON 3. And then the Russians will go to DEFCON 3. If we go to 2, they go to 2. It's part of the strategic nuclear alliance that we have with Russia. It's, I guess it's fair in the game of nuclear weapons. Not fair for those of us who want to live on this planet, but fair so the missiles don't get ahead of themselves. But they decided to stay at 4. We went to DEFCON 3. Really the saddest moment occurred at 10:28. Everybody's looking up at the TV screen, and they said, in fact, the North Tower was on the ground. I remember just disbelief, saying we saw the antenna go, we knew it was really horrific. Cheney standing up at TV said, "Get me President Bush." And sure enough, the president came up on the net. And he goes, "Mr. President, we just lost the North Tower. Sir, it's my best guess that we have 40,000 dead Americans in the city of New York." President Bush didn't say a word. We thought maybe the call dropped off the net. And all of a sudden, we just sat there in silence for a minute. And then he came back and said, "Has anyone spoken to Mayor Giuliani?" The vice president said, "No, sir, we haven't been able to get hold of the mayor. Nobody here has spoken to him." He goes, "What are the hospitals saying right now up there in New York? What are we getting as far as wounded and dead? What are the reports from the primary care centers up in Manhattan?" "Sir, we're not getting any reports from any hospitals at this point. Nothing." And then finally he said, "Well, what's FEMA telling us? Isn't FEMA on the ground up there?" And Vice President Cheney said, "Mr. President, FEMA hasn't even left yet." So really, here it is, an hour and 45 minutes after the attack on America began, and we had no response for the terrorists. New Yorkers, ordinary citizens, were on their own, just helping each other out. 40,000 dead as we sat there in the bunker complex. It was really an incredibly sad moment for all of us. 10:45, as a result of continuity of government that we talked about earlier, we got the speaker, all the buildings evacuated, the justices were where they needed to go, except the Speaker of the House, third in line to the presidency, was not where he should have been brought. Finally, Dr. Rice comes right over to me. I don't know why she keeps coming to me, but she kept coming to me. And she goes, "Major, do you know where they're supposed to bring the Speaker of the House?" "Yes, ma'am, I do." Actually, I didn't. I had a good idea, but I really wasn't sure. And she goes, "Well, he's not where he's at. Find out where he's at." Well, the Marine Corps taught me, if you're going to lie to a senior officer, best thing you can do, put some distance between you and them. Hopefully they'll forget they tasked you, and everything will be okay. So I start, and I'm heading out now. I'm in a full stride. I'm walking to the other side of the bunker complex. I get all the way over there, and I swear she was this close to me going, "Hey, where the hell are we going?" And I said, "Ma'am, we're going to use this phone right here." Sure enough, I pick up the phone, White House switchboard. I knew the U.S. Air Force had the mission. I get hold of a full bird colonel out there, and I said, "Hey, sir, this is Major Bob Darling. I'm calling from the bunker complex, the PIOC. Did you drop off the Speaker of the House?" And meanwhile, she's poking me going, "I need an answer. Where is he at?" And this colonel goes, "I will not discuss this with you on an unsecure or non-secure phone." And I go, "Sir, there are no more secure phones left in Washington, D.C. Tap once for yes, twice for no. Did you drop the man off?" And she's poking me now. I want an answer, and I want it now. This colonel wouldn't budge. Finally, I said, "Sir, they couldn't give a hoot if you yelled it through a Dixie cup. Did you get rid of the man? Did you drop him off?" Well, she thought that was funny, and she goes, "Hang up on that moron." And I got to tell you, when you're a Marine Corps major and you get permission to hang up on a full bird colonel, you take it. And I was good at it. I went. And as soon as I hung up that phone, all the speaker boxes, "Speaker of the House arrives, Speaker of the House arrives," and everybody was thanking me as if I had something to do with it. I took full credit for that. Here it is, 11 o'clock. At least all those airliners who haven't quite figured it out yet what was going on and who didn't want to land in Kansas, everybody wants to make it to Vegas. I don't understand why. We assumed they were under duress, and they were either hijacked or something else was going on. So now we're scrambling fighter jets all over the place to chase these aircraft down to try to figure out what's going on. And that's what that file photo of Vice President Cheney on the phone in there, we were crossing off airliners as they landed safely, and we're out of the sky finally. Here it is, 11:48. Now you have to remember now, President Bush decided with the Air Force One pilot, his head Secret Service, and the military aide that carries the package, the football they call it, they decided they're going to go into Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. We are DEFCON 3 right now. We have continuity of government in effect, continuity of presidency in effect, and nobody kicked CNN off base down at Barksdale, Louisiana. And they're filming the arrival of Air Force One. And that was the first time I saw Cheney get visibly upset that day, because the Air Force had not kicked the press corps off. And now if the terrorists are wondering, hey, whatever happened to Air Force One? It's right on channel, whatever CNN is filming it as the wheels come down, and And there's Air Force One landing in Barksdale. He wasn't pleased about it. But we taxied him in, we got him off, we got him over to base operations, he made some comments, we refueled Air Force One, we packed it full of food, we got him back airborne as quickly as we possibly could. 11:58, Colin Powell, he was in Lima, Peru. When you start talking about important government officials and succession to the presidency, as someone who was a 4-star Army general, a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a Secretary of State, they want him back in the United States, and they wanted us to track his progress coming back home. And that's what he was. He was wheels up out of Lima, Peru. Here it is, 1 o'clock in the afternoon now. We finally get a report. We got a confirmed hostage aircraft or a confirmed bogey aircraft heading for the president's Crawford Ranch down there in Crawford, Texas. So right away we call the Pentagon. Pentagon scrambles 2 F-16s at a Kelly Air Force Base, San Antonio. They are supersonic. They're cleared hot for the intercept. They're going to go down and find out what this is. And they get down there, and it wasn't a bad guy or a bogey aircraft. It was a crop duster. Now, these crop dusters don't have radios. This guy is drinking the cognac, dropping the deep. He has no idea what's going on in the world when 2 F-16s went by about 1,300 miles an hour. So we were joking. First of all, we're lucky his aircraft didn't just come apart and him float himself down to the ground. But we were joking that when he landed and sobered up, he drove over to see the sheriff and said, "I just saw 2 UFOs." Because that's exactly what it must have looked like, those things going by at Mach whatever. 13:45, President now's wheels up. He's out of Barksdale. He's going over to Offutt Air Force Base, Strategic Command out there. Great place for him to be. Great big underground bunker complex. He can stay there as long as he needs to do it. Here it is, almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Continuity of government, DEFCON 3, the whole thing. We got 2 carrier battle groups out of port. That is a monumental feat. You're talking about a carrier strike group, an aircraft carrier, guided missile destroyer, a fast attack submarine, 2,000 Marines, all the ammunition and weapons and airplanes you can carry. And now we got the George Washington out of port in Norfolk, and we got the John F. Kennedy out of port in Jacksonville, Florida. America's going to war. We got 2 strike groups heading out. Here it is, almost 3 o'clock, and the president lands over at Offutt. And immediately they take him underground. As soon as he gets down there, we get another call. We have a confirmed hostage situation on board, a U.S. Airways airliner. It just left Madrid, Spain, going towards Philadelphia. The president comes on the net. They have an air threat conference. The president authorizes the U.S. Navy to shoot it down if it gets within 400 miles of U.S. airspace. 400 miles is the air defense zone around America. If that plane keeps coming and pierces our airspace, the U.S. Navy's going to shoot it down. Sure enough, that plane turns around. It wasn't a hostage situation. It was a passenger having a heart attack. Again, information piling into the bunker complex, uncorroborated, unvalidated at that point. Here's the president. He's underground. He's at Offutt. You got a 4-star general on your right. There's President Bush. There's Andy Card, the White House Chief of Staff, and he's with that White House communicator that's patching him through on any air threat conference that he's having with everybody else that day. As soon as he has his National Security Council meeting, they're trying to convince the president not to come back to Washington, D.C. You got the head Secret Service agent, you got the Vice President, Dr. Rice, Pentagon's still burning, smoke over the White House. They're saying, "Mr. President, just don't come back." He immediately came up on the net and said, "Continuity of presidency is no longer in effect. I'll be wheels up as soon as possible. I should be back around 6:30 that night. And when I get back, I want a second presidential daily briefing." He gets a security briefing, intelligence briefing every day at 8 o'clock. He had one that day, and when he comes back, he wants a second one. If you remember 9/11, the CIA didn't talk to the FBI, who didn't talk to the DIA, who didn't talk to the NSA. Everybody was very stovepiped. And now, Dr. Rice and Cheney are saying, get those Suburbans on the road. If anybody's got actionable intelligence, bring it into the White House. The president wants to be briefed at 6:30 that night when he gets back. And that was the primary mission. Something else happened right here. The FBI elite counterterrorism team, the hostage rescue team, was in San Francisco on a training mission, all 75 members. United Flight 93 that departed Newark, crashed in Shanksville, was supposed to make it to San Francisco. So in San Francisco, there's tons of pilots, family, air crew, grief counselors, everybody's there. HRT is there. United goes to their chain of command over to Justice into the White House. We would like to fly HRT back to Washington, D.C. The White House Deputy Chief of Staff came over to see me, Joe Hagan. He said, Major, if I free up a C-17 and let these guys take HRT home, does that help you? Yes, sir, it helps me. I got a million other things to do with that aircraft. He said, granted, approved. For the first time in history, United Airlines became Special Air Mission 8811. They're carrying HRT from California, San Francisco, back to Washington, D.C., Ronald Reagan Airport. I made the huge, colossal error. I took them off my scope of things to worry about. And that's going to come back to bite me later on. So sure enough, the president gets back at 1830. I will tell you, they were building the president's daily briefing down at the bunker complex. People were coming in with actionable intelligence. There was no question who was responsible for this attack, where he was, and now the big question we had to answer for the president is, what's it going to take to get 300,000 forces, armor, Marines, air wings, carriers, and go take down the Taliban and the ISI responsible for harboring Al-Qaeda, which did the attack on America that day. As soon as the president got in, he's in the bunker complex, the executive side. He sits down, and they're going around the table right now, and they're giving the president their data dump. We're looking at him going, come on, Mr. President. I saw the president's daily briefing. We knew who was responsible for the attack. We knew we were going to war. And then finally, he looks up and goes, FEMA, where are you at? Mr. Joe Alba. He goes, Joe, you can get the checkbook and get out of here. Get up to New York. I hear it's a mess up there. Where's transportation? Here, sir. Hey, Norman Mineta, I want trains, planes, and automobiles up and operating by noon tomorrow. As soon as you figure it out, let me know. I want to see my national security team upstairs in 5 minutes. The rest of you, thanks for coming. Up out of his chair, he went. Out the door he goes. Everybody's upstairs. Again, America's off to war. He ended up briefing the nation that night at 8:30. We were attacked by a faceless coward, a bunch of terrorists from a faraway lands, whose only mission that day was to kill as many Americans as possible. Sure enough, the president decides that he's now in the residence sometime around 11 o'clock that night. He retired for the night. I'm down the bunker complex. I'm getting all those cabinet officials who were out of the country. We're getting them back home. We're working on getting Alan Greenspan back home, Secretary O'Neill out of Japan, Principi out of California. The president's going to have emergency cabinet meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning. He wants his entire team there. Sure enough, if you remember, HRT coming back all by themselves, alone and unafraid, Special Air Mission 8811, off my scope. Well, the skies over America are completely empty except for this 767 carrying HRT. Well, then 2 F-16s decided to escort them into Washington, D.C. So as I'm down the bunker complex, all the alarms started going off. You hear the sirens and the bells and the whistles, and all you think in the back of your mind is, good grief, I hope I have nothing to do with that. And sure enough, you hear Secret Service entering the residence is a report. They are scooping the president and first lady out of the rack. They are now coming down as rapidly as they can. The doors burst open, machine guns out, president and the first lady in their pajamas. They got Barney and Spot under their arms, and they come barreling into the bunker complex. And sure enough, the president's like, hey, what's going on? I got 3 bogeys. What's happening? And we had to soon tell him that those were our guys. Lack of coordination, lack of tracking, those are all friendlies, Mr. President. And I will tell you, if anybody here ever becomes president, do not sleep naked. Because really from the time of alarm to the time of door, there would have been none of, let's get ourselves dressed. President was down there. The president gave the all clear, and I will tell you, just as a military man, no words needed to be said to me. As he started walking out of the bunker complex, he just stopped for a second. He turned around and looked at me like, you don't want to be the airlift operator that gets me yanked out of the rack again tonight. No, sir. And off he goes. All clear, he's back in the residence. We had the distinct pleasure soon after of taking a small team of us, the White House did, up to Ground Zero. When they talked to the first responders up there, as many of you may know, they were told horrific stories, but some of the things that really stuck out to me, there were no desks, there were no escalators, elevators, chairs, computers. There was nothing you could have picked out of the 13 stories of carnage to say, hey, look, that used to be a laptop. At 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit with 2 110-story buildings coming down on each other, it eviscerated everything in its path. It was nothing but ash, glass, and twisted steel. And by twisted steel, I mean beams, girders, you and I couldn't get our arms around, were ripped like paper, down to 13 stories of pure carnage. More pictures here from our first responders down the bottom saving lives, and some horrific civilians up there caught in its carnage. Next one here. This is really why I do what I do and why I take so much pleasure in doing it. I will not forget the wound to our country and those who inflicted it. I will not yield. I will not rest. I will not relent in waging this struggle for freedom and the security of American people. President George W. Bush, September 20th at the National Cathedral. Our number one ally in the world. They have no moral inhibition on the slaughter of the innocent. If they could have murdered not 7,000 but 70,000, does anyone doubt they would have done so and rejoiced in it? There is no compromise possible with such people, no meeting of the minds, no point of understanding with such terror, just a choice, defeat it or be defeated by it, and defeat it we must. Tony Blair. Okay, so as I begin my closing comments for today, I always tell everybody I inject levity where I think it's appropriate, but there was really nothing funny about September 11, 2001. And I think it's very important, especially on today, that we never forget the nearly 3,000 brave Americans, some you may have even known personally, who were trapped in the World Trade Center towers, working at their desk in the Pentagon, or fighting for their very lives on United Flight 93. These Americans were undeserving victims of pure evil and hatred by a group of calculating Islamic fanatics whose primary mission was to kill as many Americans as possible that day. But the terrorists got it wrong. Rather than destroy us, they unified us. Instead of instilling fear in us, thousands flocked to recruiters around our country to join our ranks. Instead of overwhelming us in despair, it unleashed a wave of patriotism in all of us and summoned one of America's greatest attributes called resilience. For it was our resilience to help us win the American Revolution, recover from the Civil War, as well as end 2 world wars. It was our resilience that enabled us to overcome earthquakes, epidemics, floods, and hurricanes. And on 9/11, it was our resilience that empowered ordinary Americans to do extraordinary things to save each other. Whether it was our first responders who wouldn't turn back knowing the danger they faced, the Port Authority police who wouldn't leave their post, our air traffic controllers who wouldn't quit until every aircraft was on the ground safely, our New York City construction workers, ferry boat captains, shopkeepers who willingly volunteered to save a stranger's life. And we will never forget the extraordinary resilience of the passengers on board United Flight 93, who overcame unprecedented fear and confusion to unite themselves to fight against the terrorists and keep them from succeeding in their mission to reach Washington. And if a crisis or terrorism act should come to our soil again, and it most likely will be, ordinary citizens, a new crop of resilient men and women who possess the moral fiber, intestinal fortitude, and personal character to overcome fear and confusion to save our great country once again. And we must certainly never forget the incredible service and sacrifice of our nation's warriors and their families who have given so much of themselves over the last 14 years so we can continue to live free. It's because of their efforts, terrorist activity around the globe is now being identified, dismantled, disrupted, and even attacked preemptively if need be. Our warriors continue to fight and defeat terrorists in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, Philippines, Horn of Africa, Pakistan, Indonesia, and many other places where CNN isn't. Our intelligence agencies are talking, our borders and ports are being improved, and thanks to the heroic actions of our elite Navy SEALs, the man responsible for the most destructive act of terrorism to ever take place on U.S. soil is dead. We shocked the world with our determination to find him, our military capability to reach him, and our resolve to bring him to an appropriate end. But this fight for freedom is far from over. Even as I stand with you here today, 14 years after the 9/11 attacks, the world is terribly unstable and dangerous with the rise of ISIS, our growing tensions with Russia and China, the nuclear ambitions of Iran, and the constant threat of militant Islam attacking us here at home. Our warriors truly need us now, all of us, more than ever before. We need to support great organizations like the Wounded Warrior Project or the charity here today, the Community for War Veterans and their families. These nonprofit programs help provide the resources our veterans and their families need to get by. Our veterans won't ask for help. It's just something we simply need to do. If America is going to succeed in its fight against radical Islamic terrorism, we all need to see and feel the connection that exists between the safety and security we all seek and the importance of serving the ones we count on most to provide that freedom into the future. It is truly the best way to preserve the strength of our families, the strength of our communities, and the strength of our nation. In closing today, I want to thank you all personally for your patriotism, your willingness to serve each other and our nation. Your contributions are immeasurable and vital to the continued defense of our great nation. Keep praying for victory and never underestimate the enormous impact you have on the lives of so many. God bless you, and God bless the United States. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I couldn't say it any better than, Bobby, you are an amazing, amazing man with an amazing story. Thank you again so much for that. I want to, the program ran a little bit longer. I want to make just one other announcement that at 7 o'clock tonight, there will be a candlelight memorial service here at the Chapel of the Most Holy Rosary in the Dominican Center to remember those who lost their lives in New York City, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. 14 years ago. Also those who have died since due to the effects of the attacks that occurred on September 11, 2001, and all are welcome to attend that this evening. On behalf of Mount St. Mary's, Nick Predis, all of the people that put this program together today, I thank you for attending. Bobby will be at the back of the auditorium if you'd like to talk to him afterwards, if you'd like to ask him a question. But certainly I think that today's remarks were both moving and, as he said, patriotic, and we thank you again for attending here today. Thank you, Bobby. I think you know the books are on sale in the auditorium. Certainly don't go home without one.